Feature flags is something you should start embedding in your workflow when you are designing a system. What feature flags allows us to do is to have continuous deployment of new features and new functionality that we continuously can ship to production environment, but we can have flags that wrap around the features so that we can, at any time that we want, flip the toggle to enable the feature to be available for the customer. Because it's really great to have pipelines that will continuously deploy new code, for example, for bug fixes. But for new features, you don't always want to release them continuously, but rather wait for a specific point in time where you see it fit that now the feature can be enabled and available to the user. And with the feature flags, this allows us to ship the code beforehand and have it hidden behind the feature flag. And then whenever the time is right, we flip the toggle and the feature is now available for the customer. So in this video, I want to showcase two examples of how we can use feature flag in a web application. The first one is one of the most basic ways you can use feature flag. On the right, we have a basic web application, which is an e-commerce store. And Christmas is coming up, so I thought, why don't we add a Christmas theme to this website? And I want to be a bit in advanced here, so I have already started adding a theme, and I have created it. It lives here in this tiles. And this has all the variables for all the colors that we want to use when we want to enable this theme. But it's a little bit early now, and I don't want to add the theme right away, but it will be nice to deploy the code so that it's in production and ready to be used whenever December comes along. So the way that I would deploy this theme is that I would add this attribute to the HTML element. If we go to the root of our application, this is where I have defined my HTML element. And as you can see up here, I have defined a variable which is simply set to false, and this is our feature flag. And then I use this to determine if we want to enable this data theme with a Christmas or empty. So currently set to false, and this means that this is going to be empty and the theme is not going to be shown in the UI. Now, whenever December comes along, we can simply flip this to true. And as you can see, my page now has some green and red Christmassy colors on it. And you might be thinking, okay, but as I said in the beginning, feature flags allows us to separate deployments from releases. But doing it this way, we have to actually go into the code, manually update it from false to true, and then redeploy it. So this can be really useful for like really basic cases. But as you see below here, I have another case where I instead imported from the environment variables. As in this project, I simply have an env file, setting it to false. And now, as you can see, there are no longer the Christmas theme. And this way, we can actually go into our production environment and we can update this environment variable and set it true instead. Now, our page will have the Christmassy colors without us having to redeploy. A third way you can do this is to store your variables in a database and then make a query to the database to fetch the value. This way, you can create like an admin dashboard where you can easily update this variable. But if you're already going this far, then you might want to look into other like third-party feature flag system. There are tons out there. On the top of my head, you have one called Unleash, which is a feature flag tool where you can manage your feature flags and easily toggle them on up. And they also have more advanced functionality that I'm going to come to later in the second example. This is not sponsored. There are tons of different feature flag system out there. So if you don't want to implement your own, you can use any of these. As a final tip for this first example, I just want to showcase that in this case, this is a feature that is time sensitive. We only want to enable this feature when it is Christmas. So in this case, you can actually do something like this, where you just check if the current month is December. And then you will have this theme available throughout December without you actually having to do anything or flipping the toggle on and off. For my second example, we are still on this basic e-commerce site, and when you click on the project, you see the details of the project, but then you scroll down and we have this recommendations section down here. Now, this is a pretty old system, and it uses like all algorithms for detecting what items to recommend to you. And we have seen in our analytics that, well, we're not getting too many clicks when we recommend these items to our users. So we want to try and create a new algorithm that is more optimized and will actually get more users to click on them, and eventually get my business to sell more products. But a recommender system like this is really hard to test because you can, of course, test to make sure that it actually recommends products to you, but it's hard to test if it actually gives the business any value, meaning if it actually makes your customers actually purchase more products. So in this case, feature flag can be used to slowly test this in with your real users, where you have real customer data and real interactions. So firstly, let's say we want to test this internally first in our production environment, just to make sure that we actually get some recommendations that looks okay. So right now I'm logged in as John Doe, and let's say that I'm going to be a test user. With that, I have this get recommendations endpoint, which is currently now just returning the legacy recommendation algorithm. So what we can do is, if we want to test this internally, is that we can create this like array of test users. Currently, it's only going to be me. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to check if the requesting user is in this array of test users. And if it is, I'm going to use my new recommendation algorithm. And as you can see now in our application, I'm logged in as John Doe. I see other recommended items, and this looks better because they are related to makeup. But then let's say I log in as another user, so a normal user, which is not part of the test group. They will go and get the old algorithm. So we're not like exposing the new algorithm before we have tested internally and make sure that it works. And then let's say, okay, now we have tested internally and we want to try and slowly roll this out to see if we actually do get value out of this new algorithm. But we don't want to release it all at once because we want to compare a little bit. So let's say in both the legacy recommendation algorithm and the new recommendation algorithm, we have implemented some analytics that will check how often user clicks on the recommendation items. And now, instead of just using this new recommendation algorithm for the test users, we're going to use, let's say we want to release it for 20% of our users. You can do something like this. And this is kind of a stupid example because I'm just taking random and checking if it's less than 0.2. If it is, then we use the recommended one. If not, we use the legacy one. If I now go to the app, we can see that it uses the old one, the new one, the old one. Then the majority of the time, it's going to use the old one. But then we can collect the data about our users and see if, okay, now they got the new recommendation algorithm. Does that actually impact them clicking on the products or not? And then you can slowly bump this number up. Now, something to be aware of here is if you do some UI changes, for example, where you move some stuff around and want to see if that actually provides a better user experience, you don't just want to use random. You probably want to use like some characteristics of the user, for example, their ID, so that when the user visits your page, they get a consistent result and not things changing around from day to day or from refresh to refresh. So let's say you want to roll out a new feature to 50% of your user, you can check, for example, if their ID is odd, then you show the new feature, or if the ID is even, you show the old feature. Now, there are plenty of different ways you can resolve this. But this is just a basic example, introduction to feature flag. Hopefully you learn something from this and can take it a step further.